now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may be seated. Honorable members, before we proceed with today's business, I wish to announce that I have been informed by the Democratic Alliance that it has designated Ms. N.W.A. Mazon as the new Chief Whip of the Opposition. Congratulations, Honorable Member. Honorable members, the only item on today's order paper is questions addressed to the President.
Deputy Speaker?
Yes, sir.
Before we proceed, I just want to check if the President will be using these facilities because they are obstructing us. So if not, because then oral-based interaction, firstly. Secondly, it may be cheating if orally he'll be looking at that thing when he answers, because then it means it's not an oral reply. And therefore, can we please get a chance for these things to be removed either way? Firstly, they are obstructing us. Secondly, it will be a cheat. If the President will be looking at the teleport to answer our questions orally, then it's not an oral reply.
Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Yes,
may I address you on the same point of order?
No, wait a minute. Let the member sit down. When he must do so when he finishes talking. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, if the Honourable Dr. Ndlozi was sitting in his own seat, he would not be obstructed.
Deputy Speaker.
On the same point of order. On the point of order.
Yes,
I'm sitting in my own seat, but I'm obstructed as well. And he was raising on behalf of all of us who are obstructed.
Okay.
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member.
I have a confession to make. It's my first time today, therefore me.
Yes, Honourable Member.
Yeah, Deputy Speaker, it doesn't matter. The substantial objection has to do with the fact that this is an oral session. So this is not going to be sustainable if the President is being given, because they are electronic and digital, these things.
Okay.
We've seen a lot of incompetence in answering orally here. We don't want to subject the President to that.
All right.
They must go with the greatest respect.
Honourable members, let me start with the last point about this being an oral reply. The questions were submitted to the President in advance, and therefore you would expect him to have thought about his responses, and so that you can also get them in writing as soon as he finishes. He provided it. He will read his answers. This is what he has done before. The prompt is really what a choice that he would have made to want to do it, so that he can present in a manner that he feels fit to our convenience, but to the convenience of his presentation, of the answers we sought from him. So I'd like us to proceed on that understanding, including the fact that there are differences of opinion about these matters. Can you allow me to let us go ahead, Honourable Member? Please, let's do that. There are substantial issues we want to hear answers to, and so I would plead with us to proceed on that understanding. Thank you for your appreciation. Members may press the button on their desks if they wish to ask a supplementary question. And I wish to remind members that names of members requesting supplementary questions will be cleared as soon as the fourth supplementary question is answered. The first question has been asked by the Honorable P.T. Mantashe, the Honorable the President. Mogamed.
Honorable Speaker.
It's still Deputy.
Speaker.
Thank you, President.
Yeah, Deputy.
Thank you.
My apologies. It's an upgrade. Everybody's getting promoted these days. Let me start off by congratulating Mr. Steenhuisen, Honorable Steenhuisen, and Honorable Mazzoni for acceding to the new positions. And I hope that they will execute their responsibilities with a lot of effectiveness, as we expect. So congratulations.
That's where the upgrade is, President.
I had wanted to say to Honorable Ndozi, one should be careful what one asks for, because you never know what you can get. The Minister of Finance used these teleprompters yesterday, and they forgot to lift them off. So I'm taking advantage of what was left. It's a leftover by the Minister of Finance. So sometimes we can pick up leftovers, and they are quite useful. Honorable Deputy Speaker, let me start off by making an announcement. I have been requested by the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Honorable Natim Tetra, who is currently in Japan, waiting to attend the final, and he's directed me to join him, which I will be doing after this question and answer. But he requested, he said, President, I know you're answering questions in the National Assembly. Could you kindly make the following announcement, that we would like all South Africans tomorrow on Friday at 1300 hours, 1 p.m., to either wear the Springbok jersey if they have one, to pause for a moment of silence wherever they are, and to, if they are in vehicles, to blow their horns at 1 o'clock, so that we send a very clear support message to the Springboks. Naturally, we expect them to play their hearts out on behalf of all South Africans, knowing that all of us are going to be firmly behind them, and that they will be lifting the Webb Ellis Trophy to bring it back home, where it belongs. Honorable members, the South African economy is in a dire situation. The unemployment figures announced earlier this week clearly underline the extent and the urgency of the challenge that we must all face as a nation. Now, as the Minister of Finance outlined in his medium-term budget policy statement yesterday, the economy is estimated to grow, as we all heard, at 0.5% this year, which is a huge decline from where it had been estimated to be growing at. Public finances are severely constrained and require far-reaching measures to curb expenditure. as a country faced with this grave situation, we can do a number of things, and some of the things we can do is either we lament or we act. We have chosen to act by confronting these challenges and to undertake the painstaking work that is required to rebuild our economy and restore it to a path of growth. That is what we have chosen to do. The measures that we have embarked upon are in support of the vision that is set out in our National Development Plan, which guides the measures that government needs to take to remove race, gender, and class as determinants of economic and social advancement in our country. The medium-term strategic framework provides a 5-year program to advance towards the 2030 vision that all of us have embraced of our National Development Plan. Now, at the center of this framework is the achievement of greater economic inclusion, which we hope to achieve through job growth, skills development, and the reduction of poverty. Now, this is necessary to achieve a South Africa that belongs to all the people who live in it and where the wealth of the country is shared amongst all its people. This means that we need to grow the economy and ensure that it benefits all South Africans, not just some South Africans. One of the ways of generating growth, as we all know in the economy, is to increase the level of investment so that we have firms and companies that can create jobs. Our drive to significantly increase investment in the economy is gathering momentum, as we heard from the minister yesterday. Next week, we will hold the second South African Investment Conference, where around 1,500 investors and business people will gather in Johannesburg to consider the wide range of investment opportunities in our country. We are heartened by the fact that the turnout to the investment conference has exceeded our expectations, in that we've got that number of investors and people who are interested in investing in our economy for the first time and to invest further, who want to come to our conference. And we are at a stage now where we're beginning to turn people away. Now, vital in the effort to drive investment is our infrastructure build program. We've said in the past that infrastructure is one of the key drivers of economic growth. It has served us well in the past, and we all saw how well that drove the economic growth in our country leading up to 2010, where there were cranes throughout the length and the breadth of our country and yellow equipment building and planting infrastructure into our country. Now, infrastructure build decreased significantly over the past few years. It was with a view to addressing this problem that we decided to set up the Infrastructure Fund, through which we aim to mobilize funds, as I once said in this very house, from various sources, both public and private, to invest in priority projects that will expand the capacity of our economy and create jobs and improve service delivery. Where do we want them to invest? We obviously want to build bridges, we want to build dams, we want to build roads. Yes, we also want to build social infrastructure like houses, hospitals, and all those types of infrastructure built up projects. This is taking place alongside and in support of the implementation of an enhanced industrial strategy. Now, as part of this strategy, we are working with industries that have a high potential for growth on master plans to expand their production and contribution to job creation. During the State of the Nation address, I did say we now want to focus on various sectors of our economy and drill deeper down and see what level of growth we can extract from various sectors of our economy. And we have started to do that. And master plans of a variety of sectors are going to be announced soon, and some are already ready to be announced. To address in particular the spatial distortion within our economy, which has both racial and gender dimensions, we are developing special economic zones. Special economic zones, and we are also reviving local industrial parks that have been lying derelict for quite a number of years. And we are also establishing new business centers and digital and innovation hubs. By supporting small, medium enterprises in our cities, townships and rural areas, we are enabling the entrance of more Black South Africans, but more particularly women, into productive and sustainable economic activity. I was overjoyed 2 days ago to be in the company of a number of women who are running their own businesses, but not just businesses, in the manufacturing sector of our economy. We have a single-minded focus on the creation of employment on a massive scale. While the economy is creating net new jobs, these are not nearly enough to match the number of people who continue to enter the job market every year. This is because the working age population is growing much faster than the jobs that are being created in our economy. And the number of people who have now started looking for work again has increased. Many of them were discouraged, and as they've seen that there's a potential for this economy to grow, they have now thronged once again to the job marketplace. While economic growth is absolutely necessary for job creation, we have embarked on specific measures to direct young unemployed people into employment and other economic activities. Now, this program aims to ensure that every young person in South Africa has a place to go, is given a chance, whether in further education or training, skills development, employment, work experience, entrepreneurship, or youth service. We're opening up all those channels to give young people an opportunity to get jobs, job opportunities, and get good training to be ready for the world of work. We are currently working with our social partners on implementing the creation of jobs in line with what we decided on at the Job Summit, focusing on challenges and opportunities in specific industries. As you once heard, the Deputy President and ministers and myself meet our social partners every first Monday of the month to look at precisely the constraints that we can remove to ensure that we implement the Job Summit agreements, and we are making progress. Our economic programs are fundamentally directed towards the reduction of poverty. We have said that within the next decade, no person in South Africa should go hungry, and that we will eradicate poverty within a generation. This we are focused on, and this is something we want to achieve. This, more than anything else, will help to remove race, gender, and class as determinants of social and economic advancement. We are working on programs to reduce the cost of living, and I've often said that the cost of living in our country is rather too high, and one is not only focusing on data prices, transport prices, it's a whole variety of areas where the cost of living is excessively high and has an overbearing effect, particularly on poor people. Now, we're focusing on that to improve public transport and expanding the asset base of the poor through accelerated land reform and the provision of well-located housing. We are working to improve the quality and accessibility of health care for the poor, and through the introduction of the NHI to reduce the massive inequalities between the public and private health sectors. The national minimum wage, which came into effect or operation in January of this year, aims to raise the income of the lowest paid workers and reduce income inequality. Ultimately, the most effective measure to reduce inequality is education and the development of skills. Since the advent of democracy, we have made great strides in making education accessible to Black South Africans, women, and the working class. Within the next decade, we want to ensure that every 10-year-old child in our country will be able to read for meaning, and have therefore called for a massive reading campaign. This is taking place alongside the work that is being done to improve the quality and the outcomes of basic education, the expansion of free tertiary education to students from poor and working class families, greater investment in TVET colleges, and the expansion of workplace learning. As I have said in this House before, nation building really requires that we take measures to advance those South Africans who have been severely disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. That is why we've directed public resources towards the poor, why we have implemented employment equity and broad-based Black economic empowerment policies, and why we have massively expanded access to education. Now, this is the focus of this government, to make sure that we redress the imbalances of the past and we position those who were previously disadvantaged in a way where they can advance and have a better life in this, our beautiful South Africa. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Before we give Honorable Mantashe the chance, can you join me, members, to welcome members of the LGBTQIT+ from the Triangle Project in Cape Town? And the pupils who just entered there, if I'm correct, are from Ceres. Welcome to Parliament. And their teachers. Yeah.
Serious indeed, not Ceres.
Bayadanki, I'll remember the lesson and where I got it from. And they are from Nduli Primary. Thank you very much. Honorable Mantashe.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, in your response, you deal with both the progress and content towards building a national democratic society as per the assertion of the
Honorable
NDP.
members, I've just introduced primary school children here. You can't contest with them. Order, please. And they are absolutely disciplined up there in the gallery. No members. Allow Honorable Mandashe to respond. Go ahead, Honorable Member.
In your response, Mr. President, you deal both with the progress and content towards building a national democratic society as per the assertion of the NDP. Given the plans and progress you outline, the current statistics and data emerging from Stats SA seems to suggest that the desired outcome is going to be far more protracted than envisaged. Turning a society and its economy around is a complex matter. Have we built into the program you mentioned the ability to measure both the impact of the reduction of inequality and the measure to determine that we are in fact achieving a fairer and more just society? If so, please indicate, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Mantashe, yes, we have, as part of implementing the National Development Plan, adopted a process through which we want to, and do assess, evaluate, and look at the progress that we are making. And fortunately, we've got a statistician office, or the Statistician General and his office, who are doggedly looking at the data, and not only the data, but our performance, how we are moving the needle in terms of achieving some of the objectives that we have set ourselves up, particularly in relation to meeting the needs of our people, which, as we do, ultimately does have an impact on poverty and ultimately should have an impact on reducing inequality in our country. For the past 25 years, we have made tremendous progress. And if you look at the statistics, we did rise in terms of reducing poverty and inequality, and we did reach a stage where we began to slide down. We've become acutely aware of this, and this is precisely what we are addressing. But we are addressing this in a situation of great economic challenge, as I alluded to right at the beginning. And even during this challenge, we are able, and we will continue to make sure that we do not, we do not regress in as far as meeting the basic needs of our people, particularly in relation to efforts that we're going to make in job creation, in education, and in health, and also, as I said earlier, in infrastructure build, because part of the infrastructure build has an impact on social infrastructure, and that too will have a direct impact or a derivative that will reduce poverty as well as have an impact on reducing inequality. So all the efforts that we are making, we want to be efforts that are measurable, efforts that the Statistician General will be able to measure in a very direct way. So we are on the course, yes, of building this national democratic society that you have alluded to, and this we want to do with all the programs and measures and interventions that we embark upon. We are on the way of improving the lives of our people, notwithstanding the economic challenges that we face right now. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Shivambo.
No, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. You know, President, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world, and that inequality is based on race, where white minorities are rich and the black majority is poor. We've got an unemployment crisis. The NDP had said that by next year, unemployment will be 14%, by 2030 it will be 6%. Currently, it's now approaching 30% in terms of official definition. But overall, we've got more than 10 million people who are looking for jobs or are capable of working who do not have jobs. Poverty levels are at the crisis level. The ministers today said we've got a huge fiscal crisis. The debt to GDP ratio is approaching 70% in terms of all these issues. And throughout the 25 years of your misdirection of government, there's not been achievement even of your own objectives. Either NDP, New Growth Path, as GISA, GIA, you have never reached anything. Don't you think that the ANC is not an appropriate vehicle to drive about meaningful economic transformation in South Africa? You have tried everything. You have made lots of commitments, but you are not delivering anything. Don't you think that when it comes to real economic transformation, you are a pen?
No, I don't think that the governing party is an inappropriate vehicle to transform this country. In fact, the governing party is the one that is transforming this country and has done a great deal. Over the past 25 years, everyone admits that we have indeed seen a great improvement in the lives of our people. That has happened, whether you like it or not, whether you agree or don't agree. The people who vote, the voters in this country, have always invested their hope and their trust in the governing party. That, Honorable Shibambu, is the real litmus test, because if the voting people of our country ever had this notion that you are talking about, they would have voted possibly for you. Now, the fact that they have continued for the past 25 years to vote for this party, which you say is an inappropriate vehicle, means that they know precisely what they are investing their confidence in. Now, that is not to say, Honorable Shibambu, our country is not facing huge challenges. And all the issues that you have cited are absolutely correct. I will grant you that. We need, obviously, to generate growth in our economy. And I thought you would also touch on, we need to change the structure of our economy. You didn't touch on it, and I will say it on your behalf. We do need to change the structure of our economy, because our economy from get-go, for over 300 years, has been an economy that has just been constructed and structured in a way where it benefited or looked after the interests of a minority. The majority of our people were never, yes, white people, the majority of our people were never really seen as active participants in this economy. Now, if you look at the policies that have been adopted, the laws that have been passed even in this parliament, you will see that efforts are being made to change the structure of this economy, to reposition this economy. If you listen carefully to what the ministers come and present here, you will have heard that nearly everyone, all of them in fact, in terms of laying out the policies, their plans, as well as the laws that are put forward to Parliament, are essentially geared to changing the trajectory of this country, transforming this country, and making sure that majority people of our country do have a better life and become active participants in the economy. Now that has happened. Many more Black South Africans are beginning to participate meaningfully in the economy. Young people are becoming more educated and learning the real outstanding, wonderful skills that Verwoerd never wanted them to get into. So now that is happening. And my good Honorable Shibambu, this is a revolution that is underway. You wait and see, and this revolution will unfold in your eyes, in your lifetime as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Steenhuisen.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your kind words, and I look forward to these engagements as we deepen our democracy in the service of the people of South Africa.
I'm meeting you soon after this to shake your hand.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope we have a cigar as well. Mr. President, I couldn't agree with you more that one of the biggest challenges facing the country is building a more just society where race, gender, and class no longer determine one's path in life. The best way to achieve this is through the greatest levelers in our society: quality basic education and quality healthcare. A good basic education in particular underpins an aspiration economy and does more to address inequality than any other intervention. It allows us to ensure an equality of opportunity without having to engineer an equality of outcome. If we agree on this, Mr. President, then how do you justify the massive cuts to the provincial governments that were made by the Finance Minister yesterday, which are undoubtedly going to have to come from the provincial education and health budgets?
President.
The challenge that the Minister of Finance and indeed the Cabinet had was, how do we deal with a number of challenges that we face? The first one is our tax collections have gone down, 53 billion down, and that is a hole that needs to be plugged and closed. Secondly, Eskom, which we all agree plays an overarching role in the economy of our country, needs to be funded, and you'll say bailed out. Now, if for instance, the government were to let Eskom go to the wall, this economy would collapse completely. And everybody agrees that you do need to support the state-owned enterprise because the economic life and social life of our country hinges and hangs on the fortunes of Eskom. Now, those two, only those two, the lower tax returns, the support that we've got to give to Eskom, have sucked out the money that we now needed to fund a number of programs. Now, funding those programs was looked at very carefully by Treasury. And in certain cases, we found that a number of departments, as well as a number of provinces, have not been able to spend all the money that they've been allocated. And Treasury is the best placed entity to be able to have a globe or globular look at all departments, and because they monitor this on an hourly basis, they've been able, if you like, to suck some money out of those departments and those provinces that would ordinarily have gone unspent. Now, what we have sought not to do is to cut spending in a drastic way across the board. And it's been a process where, for instance, we've been able to agglomerate quite a bit of money from all over, and the Minister of Finance did meet with his provincial MECs for finance. He spoke to the premiers, as he did, of course, to his cabinet colleagues. And everybody realized that we are in a tight budgetary situation or fiscal situation, and everybody had to look at how their expenditure is currently configured. And it is from that there was a little bit of a cutback. Now, you would say that maybe you should have tried to find money elsewhere. The only way we could have done so, is to go and borrow more. And borrowing more ordinarily is not the biggest challenge, except where, for instance, you are having rating agencies that are in the process of downgrading us, making our debt much more expensive. Now, we knew that whilst it could have been an option to go and borrow more, right now it is not the most viable option. We therefore had to look at how we in a way reprioritize our spending and cut it down. And it is for that reason that he also went to the executive, explained to the executive, and it will hopefully cascade down even to members of parliament in terms of how we travel, in terms of our pay scales and all that. Now, everybody focuses on the wage bill. The wage bill has gone up over the past few years excessively high. And obviously there are discussions that are going to ensue with Labour so that Labour is also in a position to understand precisely where the country is. And we hope that every South African will realize that we are in a situation where we've got to cut back on a number of things in order to save for tomorrow. In a few years, maybe 2 or 3, the tax collection will go up and we will begin to generate more growth into the economy, and Eskom and other state-owned enterprises will be able to manage their own finances, and we will return once more to a much more balanced situation. That is exactly what we are aiming to achieve. The budget policy statement that the minister released yesterday is aimed at achieving that, but also sending a clear message. We are facing a dire situation, but we are not yet out. We are still on our feet, and we intend to correct a number of areas where we need to put things right, Eskom and the tax revenue and a whole number of things. We will resolve these problems. That, I assure you, that is the message that I'm putting before all of us as South Africans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, in our quest to create a fairer and more just society, I must admit that millions of people, particularly the poorest of the poor, have been left behind. And one of the core reasons for this is the spatial planning, which we've inherited from the apartheid days, but continued 25 years later into democracy. And the city of Cape Town is one good example. Now, my question, Mr. President, is what is government's plan to create a more integrated society, taking the poorest of the poor and moving them into areas, more affluent areas, where they could mix and integrate with the other communities with better facilities? Because in these areas, you would find drug and substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, violence is increasing. We have to take them out of that environment to create a better quality of life, addressing the high levels of inequality in the country. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker and Honorable Imam. I have said in this National Assembly before that clearly the spatial architecture of our country was so designed as to ensure that the poorest people in our country live as far away from the city, from the suburbs, from job opportunities, from cheaper transport nodes, from good schools and all that as far as possible. And clearly this is the legacy of apartheid, and may I say, the more visible and ugly legacy of apartheid, that poorer people have been relegated way to the back. And it was a deliberate action by the past misrulers of this country. And clearly what we have to do, and which we are determined to do, is to change the spatial architecture of our country, and to change it by ensuring that we bring poorer people into areas where transport nodes are much cheaper, where jobs are much more available. And this, when we had a conversation with one of the leading economists in the world who's based at Harvard University, Ricardo Hausmann, he said, many other countries bring in all the poorer people into the city. They live where jobs are easily available, where transport is cheaper, where they don't have to travel long distances, where they are near factories, where they are near economic activity facilities. so that they are able to find jobs, they are able to look for jobs easily, and able to travel to work. And this is precisely what we want to do. Densification of our cities and of our metros and of our urban areas is clearly the program that we have embarked on. Now, the Deputy President has been leading a team that is looking at the release of land. And recently they came with a proposal to release 14,000 pieces of land, which the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation is going to be working with, which Minister of Agriculture is also going to be working on, to ensure that we bring in more and more people, releasing the land, releasing title deeds, and getting people to live in and around the cities of our country so that they are able to have easier access to jobs, to education, to transport, to healthcare facilities, and a whole variety of other facilities. Because as it is now, poorer people are moving more and being moved more and more out of the city areas where there are no services and where there are no facilities. So we are determined to correct the apartheid spatial architecture and turn it into the architecture of a new democratic society. I was in Bloemfontein recently with the Premier of the Free State and the Minister Sisulu of Human Settlements and Deputy Minister Mahlobo, and we were launching a housing project, which is an integrated housing project near to factories, near to the city, where our people are going to live, and opening up housing projects which will accommodate more than 6,000 people. And when I saw it, I said, this is the way we should be going. All other areas in our country should densify, bring more and more people into city areas so that people can get jobs easily. So, Honorable Imam, we are determined to do it. Even here in Cape Town, we want to do it, and we will do it without any fail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, we move to question 8. It's been asked by the leader of the opposition, and that position is now, as we've just been told the other day, by Honorable Steenhuisen.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, since the State of the Nation address in February 2018, government has undertaken a number of reforms within the economy and several institutions of state to stimulate growth and job creation. We have built a broad social consensus on measures that need to be taken to fundamentally transform the structure of the economy so that it is more inclusive, more competitive, and more labor-intensive. These efforts have resulted in initiatives such as the Job Summit, which we held last year, which has produced practical measures to protect existing jobs and to create new ones. As part of this process, we have established regular monthly meetings with leaders of business, labor, and communities to review progress in several areas of reform. The paper that was published by National Treasury in August of 2019 on economic transformation, inclusive growth, and competitiveness proposed a range of additional reforms to address constraints to growth. Now, these proposals have been extensively discussed, not just in government, but also across society. The Minister of Finance alluded to this yesterday. It is significant that Treasury has received well over 800 substantive submissions to their paper and have this week published, as the Minister said yesterday, a revised version of the paper. Now, as he said yesterday, this is a living document. This is a document which we would like all South Africans, through their institutions, individually or otherwise, to engage in. Because in the main, the document is much more about measures that we need to take to unlock constraints, to remove blockages, and generate economic growth. Some can be done immediately, some can be done later, and some can be done much, much later. They can be debated for quite a long time until consensus is reached. Now, several of the reforms that are proposed have already been acted upon, and we have seen important progress in several areas. Now, just to cite a few, we have embarked on an integrated series of interventions to increase youth employment. Now, the paper addresses the challenge of youth employment, and we have, through various discussions we've held elsewhere, the Job Summit and many other places, now embarked on various measures to address precisely this problem. Now, this youth challenge is being coordinated from the President's office through a program office, that execution office that we have established. Now, through the measures that are outlined in the roadmap for ESCOM, which was released earlier this week by Minister Gordhan, we are taking steps to make the energy sector more efficient and more competitive. We are working with the regulator on an accelerated timetable for the release of the broad spectrum. And we were able to have engagement with the regulator without obviously compromising the regulator's independence, and ask the timeline and the time frame that they have in mind in terms of their regulatory process. And they've been able to shed light on when the spectrum process will reach its fruition. We have strengthened our competition legislation, and we are reducing red tape as part of our efforts to improve the competitiveness of our economy. We have undertaken several reforms to the visa regime to promote tourism and make it easier for business people and investors to visit South Africa, and tourists as well. Now, through the implementation of these and several other measures contained in the Treasury paper, we are establishing a platform for the return to growth and for the creation of much-needed jobs. And may I say, some of these measures, some of which are also addressed in the Treasury paper, were raised with us as government by the private sector. As we have held meetings with them, they identified a number of issues which we said we will address. Some of those had to do with the mining charter, and some of those had to do with things like water licenses. Some of them come to us and say, we are prepared to invest 7 billion rand, but we've been waiting for a year and more for water licenses. So at this NEDLEC forum, which I attend every first Monday of the month, we were able to call the water licensing people and say, why is it taking so long for corporates who want to invest so much money for them to get licenses? And that in itself shed a great deal of light on some of the processes that they get involved in. And we said very clearly, we want the timeline to be reduced quite significantly. And we're going to be meeting them again. And I've said to them, I want it to be cut by 50% and more. And they are going to come with those answers. So we are embarking on a process to reposition everything that we do in our economy, removing the constraints, addressing all these things. Unfortunately, these things take time. Honorable Steenhuisen, one of the reasons why we've got an oversubscribed investment conference, which we are holding next week, is precisely because many people in the private sector can see that we are not a government that is reluctant to put into effect reforms. They see that We are determined to reform, and that's precisely what we are doing. When we engage with them, they see that for themselves. And so our continued engagement and consensus building and collaboration with the private sector is bearing fruit. And part of the fruit is the response to their attendance at the investment conference. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Ndlozi? Oh, no, sorry. Oh, yeah. One step ahead of me. Go ahead, Honorable. This is what new ones must experience, now and then, you know.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to get more young people into jobs, your Finance Minister's Mbowene's reform plan recommends lowering the regulatory barriers that are locking young people and small business out. And he recognizes that it is your own government's regulations that are erecting these barriers to this. It's something the private sector can't reduce, it's something your government has to do. And when you became president, you addressed the nation saying, and I quote, "Our most grave and most pressing challenge is youth unemployment. It is therefore a matter of great urgency that we draw young people in far greater numbers into the productive economic activity of our country." And to that we say, amen. But when you said this in SONA 2018, youth unemployment at the expanded definition was sitting at 65%. 2 days ago, we learned it has now grown to 70%. So given this dramatic increase, do you not accept that the interventions that you've made so far have failed to address this pressing challenge? And is it not time, given the fact that your own deputy president said that he doesn't take the finance minister seriously, for you to find the courage to unequivocally back Mr. Mbowene and his plan, to stop bending the knee to the unions and the communists and the other enemies of growth on your benches?
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Steenhuisen, I agree with you, and I'm glad to know that you do read the text of what I say here in this National Assembly. So that pleases me no end. Now, of course, youth unemployment is our biggest challenge. We know that. And in a way, we have become a victim of the success that we've made in bringing more and more young people. No, that's true. More and more young people are getting into education facilities, and they qualify, they get out, and when you meet them in the streets, they say, "You've given us an education, we now have certificates, but we don't work." And that is precisely the challenge that is there for all of us. And I bear that challenge, the problem, the burden of that every day, because it is precisely what we need to respond on. And as I said earlier, we're embarking on enormous initiatives which are being led in the President's office, and where we're collaborating with a number of partners in the private sector in a most enthusiastic way, including the National Youth Development Agency are involved, and a whole number of others, including the YES program, Harambe, and many others. So all those are now working on a major intervention that is going to bring in a number of young people who we are going to count in the hundreds of thousands to try and reduce the level of unemployment amongst young people. Now, clearly, you say we should abandon Labour and the communists. Let me tell you something. Labour has been and continues to be a really good partner of the governing party. And the stability that we've got in our country today is in large measure also born out of the partnership, the alliance that we have as a governing party, yes, with the communists, yes, with Labour, and yes, with other social organizations like community-based organizations. And obviously, in our discussions, we do deal with these issues. We discuss these issues. When we were negotiating the national minimum wage, some of these issues came up for discussion, and we agreed that, yes, we should have a national minimum wage which is going to cut across to be applicable to all working people in our country. Soon, the assessment of the national minimum wage impact will be out, and we'll be able to measure precisely the impact that that national minimum wage has. Now, the measures and the interventions that we are embarking on are not the type of interventions, in my view, that are going to sort of make things a lot worse. In fact, they are aimed at ensuring that we do reduce the level of unemployment amongst young people, and we're focusing our attention on precisely the employment amongst young people, because it is the biggest challenge that we face. Every year we've got more and more young people who are coming onto the labor market, and we want, for that reason, to ensure that our economy grows. We create more firms and companies that will help to create jobs, and that is the task that we have embarked upon. So if you've got better ideas on how this can be done, put them on the table. Rather than lament, we say, let's all act and let's work together to address this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Ndlozi, it is your turn now.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, the paper of Mr. Mboweni speaks about a continuation with IPPs that have been a big problem financially to Eskom, privatization of water and irrigation services. But most importantly, the paper's perspective on spectrum allocation. We have a big problem in the telecoms of a duopoly where Vodacom and MTN own about 71% of the market share. And there is no detail, but it looks like the government's attitude is towards auctioning spectra, high demand spectra. If you auction, you are selling. How will you break the duopoly if you want to break the duopoly and you are selling the spectrum? The obvious reality is that the big players have more money, and therefore there won't be competition. Data prices won't go down as a result, despite the fact that they keep promising, as it were, that that allocated spectrum will help them or will help the end user to have, much more relief in relation to data prices. But you'll never have competition with that route. What exactly is the government's position? And in particular, with breaking the duopoly of MTN and Vodacom?
Yeah.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and Honorable Ndlozi, you will have heard me speak here in this National Assembly about addressing, and in a way, if you can use the type of term that you would use, attacking the monopoly structure of our economy and breaking up monopolies. The competition law amendments that we've put in place are also aimed at doing precisely that. Because we have realized, and long ago, of course, that the way our economy is structured, and this has also been described by the IMF and the World Bank, they say one of the big problems in the economy of South Africa is that it is over-dominated by monopolies, much more than what they see in other countries. So we are acutely aware of that, and this is a historical fact. So we want to address that. Now, if you've listened very carefully to Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, as she has put forward the proposal or the policy position on the spectrum, you will have heard her say, we're going to allocate a portion of that spectrum to those who were previously disadvantaged. So there is going to be a portion which is called the WON, where there will be opportunities for the smaller and if you like, the newly established entities that want to play in the telecom space. Now, that has been set aside. But we've also got to realize that those smaller ones will obviously need funding. They will need money, and that is where they will need to be supported greatly. That's why they will be able to have this allocation and be able to go and raise money with it. At the same time, you've got the big three, or the big four, Telkom, Cell C, Vodacom, and MTN. They're all players in this field. And you've got a number of other subsidiary ones, Liquid, whatever, and so forth. They're all players in this space. And so therefore, auctioning a portion, Honorable Ndlozi, if you are still listening, auctioning a portion of that spectrum to those raises money for the fiscus, so that the fiscus is then able to utilize that, because they, in the end, are going to participate in this, and they are going to make huge investments, which we should welcome. But at the same time, they will be taking part in this auction on conditions that are clearly going to be set out, and those are developmental conditions. Those developmental conditions, because they've got the muscle, they've got the spread, are going to mean that they must go and install 4G, 5G capability in the rural areas, in the townships. So you want to use the muscle that they have to ensure that you achieve your developmental ends. But at the same time, you also want to get your new players, those who were prevented in the past by a whole number of reasons, to participate in the spectrum as well. And the way I see it in the end, even those bigger ones will envy the smaller ones who are going to participate in the set aside that has been put out for the new emerging and the newly established ones. So I believe that we've got a very balanced approach to this. It's not an approach that is aimed at further emboldening and further empowering the existing players. And in fact, if you look very closely, Honorable Ndlozi, this is one of the more effective transformative moves that this government is making on this, to ensure that we limit the powers of the monopolies by bringing in more competition. And I have spoken in this House before about how the economy of the US grew when they broke up AT&T and made sure that it is broken up to include many, many, many other players. And that is when the economy of the US took off. Now, through this, you're not going to have 4 players in the spectrum. You're going to have a multiplicity of players. And that is something that we should welcome. There's nothing wrong about that. As to the size that a Vodacom will have, and MTN will have, that is going to be the function of how, in the end, that process works out. But what we are going to ensure is to ensure that we curb the power and the influence of monopolies and allow our own emerging companies to participate in a much more meaningful way. I want you to pay attention, even spend time with Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. Go buy her coffee. Have coffee with her, and then she'll explain all this to her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable E.M. Buthelezi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. President, yesterday the Minister of Finance advised the country that there are 29,000 state employees that are earning salaries over R1 million per year. What do you do to further reduce the still bloated size of public service and thus reduce the drain on the fiscal spending as established by your predecessor?
Mr. President.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question. Sorry about that. There was too much noise.
What does the President do to further reduce the still bloated size of public service and reduce its drain on the fiscal spending?
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The issue of the public service, we've got some 1.2 million public servants. And our aim is to have one single public service that will include those people who work in local government, who work in provincial government structures, and obviously to join the ranks of the nurses and the police and other civil servants that we have, our soldiers and all that. Now, if you were to talk to the Minister of Police will tell you that he is short of a couple of thousands of people who should be brought into the police service so that the objective that he has set himself out to achieve on behalf of all of us, safety of South Africans, is achieved. So he has a shortfall in the men and women who should work in the police. If you should talk to Minister Dr. Mkhize, he will tell you that he needs more nurses, he needs more doctors, because our population has grown, our hospitals need more of those health workers. And if you were to talk to a number of other people who work in the state sector, they will tell you that they need more warm bodies, more pairs of hands to do the work. Now, right now, as the Minister of Finance said, the public wage or the salary, the civil service wage takes about 46%. Now, that indeed is a high figure, and this has come about as a result of a number of things that have happened, where we've had increases that are above inflation, and where we've had other benefits that have accompanied all that. Now, that needs to be looked at, and we're going to be looking at that with labor themselves, because the more this grows, the more we become constrained in as far as providing services to the people of our country. Now, you want to know what are we going to do? What we are going to do is actually to have thoroughgoing discussions with labor precisely about this situation that we're currently facing as a country, so that all of us can be joined in our understanding of what it is and what needs to be done. And I believe that the leaders of our labor movement in our country are sensible people. They have an acute way of analyzing situations and understanding situations, and they will realize that indeed we've got a serious challenge on our hands and we've got to address it. And we will find solutions, as we have always found solutions on many other problems that looked intractable. So we are going to be sitting down and negotiating with labor to address the situation that we find now. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Wessels.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable President, one of the priorities of the plan is labour-intensive growth, with the agricultural sector as the catalyst. But will there be an agricultural sector left when this plan is eventually implemented? Currently, farmers are going bankrupt, and the prevalence of bankruptcy are increasing because of the ravaging drought amidst exuberant input costs and policy uncertainty. Is it not time to do something now and not wait for this plan? What will your government do to urgently protect commercial agriculture? Is it not time to consider implementing protectionism for our agricultural sector? I thank you.
Mr. President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, we are determined to not only protect but to grow the agricultural sector of our country. We have identified the agricultural sector as the one sector that can generate growth and in fact can employ well over 1 million people. That is what the National Development Plan said, and that is what we have also come to as the government in terms of the measures and the interventions that we want to embark on. Now, Minister Didiza has put forward the plan that she has, and obviously working together with other colleagues. It is aimed at, one, yes, ensuring that we support the commercial agriculture sector in our country, and not only support it, also through difficulties and challenges such as drought. They will come up with programs that are going to support farmers when it comes to drought situations or situations of calamity, but at the same time, to promote farming amongst those who were prevented from participating in farming, either in terms of opportunities, lack of land, lack of support that they've never had from government, and also no access to markets. So we're promoting all that and ensuring that many, many more black people who want to be farmers. And I know that for a fact because I'm a farmer myself, and I know that many black people want to be in farm, yes, all that. In farming, they want to farm cattle, food production, they want to farm, you know, crops and the grains and all that and fruit. And we need to open opportunities for them to participate in that sector. And for them to be able to do so, they also need certain facilities, such as access to water, such as access to land, such as access to funding. So all that is now on her desk. And she, Minister Didiza, is meant to come up with strategies, and she has put forward a number of those so that they can be implemented, but at the same time support your commercial farmers. Make sure that your commercial farmers work as well. And the good thing that you may not be aware of is that a number of commercial farmers have come forward and said, we want to support the government's efforts in making sure that agriculture becomes a sunrise industry in our country. It becomes a winning industry that can employ many more people. And make sure also that the food production in our country is not compromised, that food, we should continue producing our own food. We say this having looked at a number of other countries that have been stumbling when it comes to food production. And we don't want South Africa to ever get there. In fact, we want to be a net producer of food and export. And one of the things that we are doing is to support our exporting farmers. And a number of them are also black farmers who are coming into the export market, exporting beef and mutton and all that to export to other countries. So we want to play an overarching support role to the agriculture sector of our country because we see it as a growth industry indeed. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move to question 9, and asked by Honorable KRJ Mishwe. Mr. President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, when I asked this House to approve the emergency action to combat gender-based violence and femicide 2 months ago, it was in a response to a national crisis. And I was very pleased that this House responded positively, and members who spoke very positively from their heart. It was also a response to mounting calls from our people to match our condemnation of such violence with a commitment that is necessary to ensure that necessary human, financial, and other resources are available to tackle this crisis. Since I announced that government would commit 1.1 billion towards the implementation of the plan, National Treasury has written to key departments in government and entities asking them to urgently identify funds that can be reprioritized. Departments must be commended for readily and swiftly responding to this call. We are now in a position to allocate more than 1.6 billion rand from 2019 to 2020 financial year baseline spending allocation. No longer 1.1, but 1.6 billion has now become available for this purpose. Now, departments have done that, and we are very delighted. Accountability for the expenditure on the reprioritized funds lies with the various departments themselves. The multi-sectoral interim steering committee established after last year's presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide will continue to play a key role in driving the implementation of the plan. It will, amongst other things, review, but it will also monitor and evaluate progress and ensure that there is adequate budgeting and resourcing to support the 5 key pillars of the plan. As an example, an amount of 179 million rand has been allocated to education, has also been allocated to raise awareness and to ensure that we do have an effective prevention program. We know that gender-based violence often has roots in social, cultural, and other norms that perpetuate patriarchy and chauvinism. We also know we have to focus on prevention as the first point of intervention. The Department of Social Development, in collaboration with other departments, will drive the rollout programs. And these rollout programs are going to take place throughout the country that will engage with men's forums or formations, traditional leaders, students' organizations, youth formations, offenders inside prisons, officials working in the criminal justice system, and communities at large. Work is being done to enhance our current legal and policy framework to make it more responsive to the needs of survivors of gender-based violence. This includes bail and sentencing reform to ensure that perpetrators face justice and that the law acts as an effective deterrent. Now, this funding will ensure that legislation that has been pending for quite a long time is also finalized, and where necessary, that the capacity is made available for new laws to be drafted as well. An amount of 517 million rand will go to care and support of survivors of gender-based violence. 200 social workers will be appointed to provide targeted services to survivors at various social service centers, including at the national network of Tutuzela care centers. Now, this is a phenomenal achievement, and this has been done through the discussions that the people who are participating in the sector have come up with. It will also be used to support social services for survivors at local and district municipality level. The plan, furthermore, calls for the creation of more economic opportunities for women who are vulnerable to abuse because of poverty. Now, the budget for this intervention is still to be finalized through the ongoing reprioritization process, as is the approximately 20 million rand still needed to strengthen accountability measures. Now, to ensure that the reallocation of resources has the necessary impact, government is working with civil society and other partners to ensure that all of these measures are implemented with urgency. Given the breadth of interventions, this is a challenging undertaking, but we are confident that working together we will succeed. And particularly, I must commend the compatriots of our country, the women of our country who are in the committee, in the structure, because they have been working for hours and hours and days in and days out and weeks to put together a more effective plan in this. And they are going to make sure that indeed that this does succeed. Professor Olive Shisana in the presidency is leading this process, and she is doing extremely well working together with those who are in the various gender structures in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Gwakube.
I think it's
Honorable Mishwe, sorry. Hey, KRJ, I don't know what happened to me today.
Is it Friday today?
No, they are in a hurry for Friday, Mr. President.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
it's still Thursday.
Someone on my left is in a hurry for Friday. Go ahead, Honorable Mishwe, my apologies.
Thank you for your answer, Honorable President. 2 days ago, I read a newspaper report about a 91-year-old grandmother who told journalists that for more than 20 years, she has suffered abuse, allegedly at the hands of her own son. She told them that being in her own home is like being in hell because of the abuse that she and her 2 grandchildren have endured over the years from her 53-year-old son, who is allegedly very aggressive and has even attempted to rape his own mother after telling her that he wanted to sleep with her. Now, my question, Honorable President, is how will this 1.1 billion rands that has been redirected to the fight against gender-based violence benefit such grandmothers who live in fear of their lives and are being abused and raped by family members or members of their communities who take advantage of them because of their age and fragility? Mr. President, this grandmother is crying for help. So is there anything that the President can say now, hopingly that will reach her ears, that something is going to be done by the President who will ensure that her own son who has applied for bail and his case will be hit next week is not released to go back to her and abuse her? Thank you.
Mr. President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Mishra, I read that story as well. And I took time to read it very carefully because I found it quite shocking and harrowing that a 91-year-old woman could be so traumatized and abused by her own 53-year-old son. Now, he is standing trial. The justice system has kicked in, and as you have said, he's going to seek to apply for bail. Now, clearly the issue of granting bail is the magistrate's prerogative, but we have sent a clear message to the prosecuting authority, the NPA and all those that we need now, from now on, to be opposing bail, where people who are suspected to have participated in sexual violence, acts of crime appear, whether it's rape or murder or femicide. So we're hoping that that kicks in. But more than that, the 91-year-old Gogo will be assisted by these social workers that I was talking about. The social workers that we are now going to bring in, and that will be funded by this 1.6 billion rand, will be on hand to give assistance. And apart from these social workers, there will also be psychologists and psychiatrists who will give her counseling. And also, we will be setting up more and more Tutuzela centers around the country, make sure that those who seek refuge, like this 91-year-old mama, can go there and get assistance and get support, through people or from people who are well trained. And clearly, obviously one of the things we have to do is to look at her own social situation, to look at the challenges that she is facing, and our social workers should be able to do that. But more than that, we obviously need to embark on prevention measures and interventions. It is through prevention, and it is through, as I've been challenging even people in the faith-based sector, that we should, all of us, be participating in preaching the message, ensuring that there is more and more prevention, that those who have little understanding of what gender-based violence is, patriarchy and male chauvinism is, get a better understanding of it. And we obviously want to focus on the boy child, but we also have to focus on older men. So the prevention message needs to go out more and more. So this program that, and I'm glad to say the women of our country have come up with, is an overarching program that is going to answer and address all these issues. So I've put myself in the front of that old lady and I've said, what is it that we can do as government? Now, as you asked the question, I've asked myself precisely that. And I've said what we need to lay out to her is that we are a caring and sensitive government. We are going to be there to support her. And we're also going to mobilize a number of other organizations to be there to give her as much support as we possibly can. And I hope that the religious or the faith-based sector that you are a part of, Honorable Member, you will be able to ensure that she is given the support that she needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is you now, Honorable Wahube.
Mr. President, while we commend the commitment of an additional 1.1 billion rand to the fight against gender-based violence, this money will mean nothing if police cannot gather critical evidence. 2 weeks ago, the police minister, Cele, missed his own deadline for ensuring that police stations in the country have rape kits. It was revealed that 76% of our police stations didn't have adult rape kits and 69% did not have child rape kits. Earlier this month, you vowed personally to ensure that this injustice is rectified. Mr. President, women in this country are living in a war zone. How do you explain the spectacular failure by your government to keep women safe and to prosecute those who commit those crimes against them?
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The demand that has been made by our women is very clear. They want to live in a safe South Africa. They want to feel safe. They want to be able to walk around freely without being harassed because they are women. And that is something that I am committed to trying to achieve. And we are going to make all efforts. We're going to take all steps to ensure that that is the case. Now, this is an ongoing challenge. We have risen to the challenge. The women of our country have raised the issue at a higher decibel, and we have heard them. I went to a police station in Inanda recently with Minister Cele, and one of the things that I asked when I got there is to ask whether they have rape kits for adult women and for young women. And they said, President, we have. And they immediately lined up. Much as they knew I was coming, much as they knew, they had lined up. They had lined up in the police station. Now, maybe you should listen first. You really need to listen. We are dealing with a very serious matter. And I must say, Deputy Speaker, that I do object to members trivializing this matter by interjecting as I answer, because when they ask questions, I don't interject. And I do take, because we're dealing with a very serious matter. The women in our country are listening, and they don't want to hear heckling because they want to hear the answers to the questions that you have raised. Now, let me...
Honorable
maybe I
member,
should keep quiet and not speak.
Honorable member, you can't, after a plea, continue to do exactly the same thing. It doesn't make sense. Absolutely. So if you want to scream, that door is open, you can go and scream to the loudest, not in the house here. President, please proceed. I hope members now reasonably will keep quiet.
Now, I do think we need to listen to each other when we come to this matter. This is a very serious matter. The women of our country, as you correctly say, have a sense that this country has declared war on them. And we need to work together rather than throw stones at each other. And I want to hear very clearly from the honorable member about those police stations that do not have those rape kits. I want to hear which ones, because I will either want to go myself with or without the minister, and I will want to know what is happening, because I did stand here, right here in this platform, and committed our government to doing something about it. And if it is not happening, if it is not happening, I want to know where it is not happening. I don't want to hear heckles. I want to hear where it's not happening and why it's not happening, so that I'm given chapter and verse, so that I'm able also to put the minister on the spot and say, Minister, why is this not happening? Because it must happen. We've committed ourselves as a nation that we are going to address the plight of the women of our country. And that I am committed to, and I want to see it happening. So it really, really disturbs me a great deal to hear that 69% of our police stations do not have child rape kits, and 76% or so do not have adult rape kits. And after this, I am going to speak to the minister right now and say, why is it not happening? And he will then be able to talk to those in his chain of command and demand that it should happen. And this is something that we must work together on as a nation to make sure that we address gender-based violence. This is not a joke, this is not a matter to laugh about, and this is not a matter to heckle about. We must do it, and let's work together. Thank you very much.
Honorable van der Merwe.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable President, thank you very much for informing us that you've employed 200 social workers, but I want to bring to your attention that the state, your government, has actually trained 5,000 social workers who remain unemployed and are sitting at home and can be vital in the fight against gender-based violence. Mr. President, as we speak, the Safe House shelter right here in the Western Cape faced closure, as it receives only 57 Rand per woman per day from government, which is meant to cover meals, transport, medical expenses, and specialist services, which is simply not good enough. In contrast, your government is spending more than 350 Rand on a prisoner in jail. Earlier this year, you made several commitments, firstly, for greater support for shelters for abused women and children, and you also told us that you will strengthen the National Command Center, the Gender-Based Violence Command Center. So my question to you is, can you please tell us today what interventions, if any, can you list as initiatives that your government has taken since your pronouncements to ensure greater support for shelters? And please, can you furnish this House and the nation at large with the number for the toll-free national government gender-based violence call center? The number, please. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Well, Honorable Deputy Speaker, let me start off by saying I don't know the number off by heart.
I can help the President.
I'd love you to help me. Let's have a coffee and you'll give me the number.
No, but I think the nation must hear.
Okay.
So it's 0800 428 428. You can take it down, President.
I'll buy you a coffee. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, on all the issues that you have raised, you're right, we've trained a lot of social workers, and it's always pained my heart to know and to hear them, because one often meets them, to hear them say, I was trained, I'm a social worker, but I do not work. Now, clearly, with this reinvigorated program that we are embarking on, yes, we have employed 200, but I want to see us employing more, to ensure that we address this problem more closely. And so we will be paying attention to this and see how we are able to spread social workers throughout the country to address this problem, because it is also through social workers like the social worker that is going to be attending to Reverend Mekhes, the issue that he raised about that GOG, the 91-year-old GOG. So we want more social workers to be spread throughout the country, and so that they are able to pay attention, to show compassion, and to counsel the various people who are traumatized and subjected to gender-based violence. And obviously, yes, we don't want any center to close. This is not the time for centers to close. And that matter will also be looked at, and my staff are listening to all this, because I will be appalled to hear that a refuge center has closed at this point in time when we are dealing with such a huge, huge challenge. I want to be able, and we were going to give more details of the measures that we are now embarking upon on gender-based violence. We're going to do it through my weekly letter. We will be doing so because I need to give an updated report, and will be doing so shortly, of precisely all the measures that we are taking. And on that newsletter, I will imprint the call center number that you have given me today. And I will memorize it and remember it at all times, so that next time when you ask me, I will remember it. Thank you very much.
Honorable Chirwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, Minister Tito Mboweni yesterday said nothing about the redirection of the 1.6 billion to fight gender-based violence, which is clear evidence that this again is one of your empty promises that are misleading our people. Now, my question is that, can you please extrapolate for us in detail what the prevention mechanisms will be? How will this 1.6 billion rand stop a girl child from being raped by her father, a daughter by her brother, wives by their husbands? Can you make us see the picture of what your money will do to stop men from killing women, raping them, and burying them in shallow graves? Because you have not extrapolated for that for us in detail. Thank you.
Honorable President.
Thank you. Thank you. I did mention what the Minister or Treasury did.
For point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when members were heckling this side about the importance of this question, you both were very strong to call them to order. Members of the ruling party are heckling when another member is raising a genuine question, and you remain there complicit. It's wrong. They were heckling at our member.
Honorable member.
Please call them to order, because all of us must be subjected to the same equal law.
Honorable member, take your seat. Honorable members, the whippery here acted on this matter. If you defy even your whips, it's wrong, all of you. No. Screaming shame. What shame? Shame on you. On you, all of you. All of you. You are inconsistent yourself. You deliberately keep quiet when it's not you. It's out of order. Order, honorable members. Look at what you are doing now. Just look at you are, honorable members, order, please. Honorable President, please give a response.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I was saying that the Minister of Finance, and I reported on this now, made an intervention which the Presidency asked him to make to get all the departments to delineate amounts of money that should be reprioritized for precisely this purpose. Now, that in a way is not really part of the new budgetary process. It's part of the current budget. And these are amounts of money that have to be reprioritized to address this issue. So there was no need for the Minister of Finance to address this issue. I can address it politically, which I am doing because this has been an initiative which the presidency is driving to make sure that we address the gender-based violence issue. It is firmly in our office, and therefore we can speak about it. And in speaking about it, we are going to make sure that this money, 1.6 billion, is utilized by various of our departments in a way which will address the interventions that we want. And in this regard, fortunately, we've got a steering committee made up of women who are going to be watching how this money is utilized like hawks. And at the same time, they will also be evaluating the various programs that need to be embarked upon, including preventative programs. Yes, we want to get to a point where we will be able to be so successful with our intervention program to prevent this 53-year-old man, which Reverend Michel referred to, from wanting to go and sleep with his mother. We need to embark on programs like that. And I did allude to that and said, all of us need to participate in embarking on programs that will deal with the moral fiber of our nation. Because when things like that happen, it's almost Sodom liko Gomorrah biano. That's where we have arrived, where a young man or a 53-year-old man now wants to sleep with his mother. It is the most appalling moral degradation situation that we can ever imagine. It needs to be addressed. And we therefore need to address that, come up with preventative measures. Now, unfortunately, some of these things like rapes take place in confined places, in homes, and they're done by either people that the victims know and all that. But that does not detract from the fact that we have a responsibility, not only as government, but as a society, to deal with these challenges that we face. And our programs will be aimed at doing precisely that. And Honorable Member, the good thing is that those preventative programs are programs that are going to be designed, crafted by women, and we will embark upon them and implement them jointly together with the women of our country. So it's not going to be the sole responsibility of government. It is going to be the responsibility of all of us acting together. And I hope all of us raise our level of consciousness and alertness when it comes to that. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We move to question number 10, asked by Honorable K.D. Mahlatsi. Mr. President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, as I indicated in this House on 22nd of August, the report of the Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform and Agriculture has been presented to Cabinet and has been made available to the public for comment. Cabinet still needs to finalize its deliberations on the findings and recommendations of the advisory panel, and this advisory panel has produced several far-reaching recommendations to ensure that we correct the skewed distribution of land in our country, a necessary precondition to our objective of reducing inequality in our country. Now, this report recommends legal mechanisms to recognize, to register, to record, as well as to enforce a continuum of land rights so that all our people become rights holders. The panel has called on government to immediately identify well-located and unused and underutilized pieces of land and buildings for the purpose of urban settlement and to prioritize poor tenants for upgrading their own rights. And in line with this recommendation, Cabinet itself has already taken decisions on the release of land for human settlements, as I was saying earlier. The advisory panel found that the mechanism of land expropriation without compensation is one of a range of methods that could be utilized to acquire land for the purposes of land reform. It further proposed circumstances in which such expropriation could be considered. Now, the panel's recommendations complement and reinforce the work being done by Interministerial Committee on Land Reform and Agriculture. The Interministerial Committee, which is chaired by the Deputy President, is tasked with coordinating and providing political leadership to accelerate land reform. The report of the panel has provided the country with a comprehensive, I believe, but also a just and sustainable approach to land reform. Cabinet is therefore determined to shortly finalize its considerations of the recommendation so that the land reform process can proceed at a faster rate and have greater impact. It is therefore necessary not only to address the plight of the landless in our country, but to boost the economy, to create jobs and reduce poverty, particularly in the rural areas of South Africa. I thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Mahlatsi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Firstly, thank you very much, Honorable President, for your compendious response. Firstly, I think it is important to remind Honorable Steenhuisen that you are a former General Secretary of a trade union. Therefore, how you relate to communists and trade unionists is none of his business, quite frankly. And he will not dictate to you how you should respond to them. Now, let's now deal with issues of national interest. President, whilst acknowledging that...
So now you find yourself all right to scream as you do now.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Now you find, no. You must be in order. You must not scream so that everybody is listened to.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
It's not justifiable.
Deputy Speaker, on a point of order, firstly, in this House, one does not speak directly to a member of the House. The Honourable Member directed her statement to Honourable Steenhuisen. She's supposed to be asking the President a question. So if you're going to give, you've got to get back.
So, okay. Honourable Member, let's assume you are right, which is likely. So it is correct for your members to do what you are saying they shouldn't do. Is that correct?
Deputy Speaker, what I'm saying is this. If an honourable member in this House is going to direct a statement to the Leader of the Opposition, she must expect a heckle back from the Opposition. Okay. If she's willing to speak to us, she must be willing to get an answer from us.
Honourable Mazon, welcome. Welcome to the club. You are going to get it back, okay? Yeah. Honourable
Speaker,
President, please go ahead.
Deputy Speaker, as I once famously
Please
said,
go ahead.
bring it on.
Honourable Member, you don't speak before you are told to speak. You must be allowed to speak. Take your seat, Honourable Member. Take your seat. Honourable President, please.
No, I haven't finished my question.
Go ahead, finish your President.
President, can we deal with issues of national importance now? President, while acknowledging that Cabinet is still in the process of considering the report, it would be important to give an indication to the nation that the land reform agenda is deeply bound together with social and economic justice, human development and spatial transformation objectives. Now, President, the advisory panel makes reference to the work of the IMC under the leadership of the Deputy President. Therefore, my question is, what has been the impact of the IMC on the report and recommendations of the advisory panel on the land reform? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Honourable President.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the issue of the panel, as you alluded to, Honourable Member, is before Cabinet. The Cabinet is seized with the matter and will soon be giving effect to its own consideration on that. But it has also, as you will remember, put it out to the public for the public to be able to comment. Now, the IMC itself is dealing with matters that include, but not only limited to the work of the advisory panel. The IMC has been given a more overarching type of mandate to look at land reform processes. And what they've done is actually quite admirable, because they have identified portions and pieces of land throughout the country for release to our people, both in the rural areas as well as in the urban areas. And they are ensuring that we release 14,000 hectares of land in this phase, and they're identifying further pieces of land. And they have engaged me in various processes where land has been given back to our people from a restitution point of view. And the redistributive part of giving land back to our people is also part of their mandate. So they are looking, Honorable Mahlatsi, at a very broad scope of land reform interventions, and not only limiting themselves to what the panel has been doing. And no doubt, they've applied and continue to apply themselves to the report of the panel, and they are dealing with that. They are also dealing, obviously, with a whole lot of other reports, including the Kgalema Motlanthe High-Level Panel report. So all these are all being looked at by the IMC. It's a fairly active IMC and results-oriented. And so we will be seeing more and more of reports and interventions coming from that IMC. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Groenewald.
Agbare Adjunct Speaker, Honorable President, exactly a year before this panel submitted their report to you on July 2018, at 10 o'clock the evening, you addressed the nation as President of the ANC. And what you said on land reform is exactly the findings of the panel. Even if you look at the other recommendations about the criteria, certain categories, is exactly what the ANC said their policy is as far as land reform is concerned. The Parliament in itself had the Constitutional Review Committee who crisscrossed the country to hear what the people have to say about land reform. And now my question, Honorable President, why wasted the money on yet another panel actually confirming the findings of the Constitutional Review Committee on the one side and the policy of the ANC on the other side? We say that we are in an economic crisis.
Honorable Member, your time has expired by 14 seconds.
14 seconds, thank you.
Yeah,
So no, it's over. It's over your time by 14 seconds. I allowed you to complete your question. You have not.
Okay. My question then, are you going to accept the minority report recommendations as well?
Honorable members, I did want to speak on the allocated time yourself. Whatever your philosophical, ideological position, it can fit within those 2 or 3 minutes that you have. Just make your choices better. I won't do this anymore because it is abuse, quite frankly, of other time. President?
Honorable Deputy Speaker, my answer is a very simple and straightforward one. The minority report by 2 panel members, Mr. Serfontein and Mr. Dan Creek, obviously will be considered as well. So both reports are before Cabinet and they are going to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Kabekulu?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, not long ago, we had Deputy President confirming, standing in the podium, that land will be expropriated without compensation. And if one may further go to say, land is a very sensitive issue, which raises emotions from people's, that is business, civil, and general public. It is a known fact that South Africa is part of a global stage, and that has its own consequences, Mr. President. For the smooth implementation of the Presidential Advisory Panel, how is government going to do it to avoid the situation where investors might pull out their investments, and that might lead to the situation where Zimbabwe had gone through? That's my question, President.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Clearly, we are in implementing the recommendations that have been put forward, which Cabinet will discuss, are going to be very mindful of precisely the issues that Honorable Member has alluded to. Obviously, we've got to have a very balanced approach. Expropriation of land without compensation is but one of the instruments that is going to be used to effect land reform in our country. That is what the panel has also said. And in doing so, we will need to look at a plethora of methods and processes. And that is why I also say the minority report that was put forward by the other panel members comes into play, because they have taken a different view, and the others the majority took a different view. So we will be looking at all what has been proposed and see how best we do it. Obviously, we will need to take into account the context, the current conditions, and the panel actually said we need to have a set of criteria as well as we implement the recommendations that they've put forward. So I think we are going to have quite a lot of scope and ability to move forward on this. But the main thing is that in the end, we must make sure that the land is returned to the people of our country. That we are going to make sure, and we will utilize a variety of measures. From 1994 up till now, we've utilized certain measures, but many of those have worked and some have not worked, and we now need to embolden our efforts and make sure that we include other measures that will take us further so that the land is returned to our people. And as I've said before, we're not going to do it in a reckless manner. We are going to make sure that land reform is done responsibly, and in all this, we'll also be guided by the resolution that was adopted by the governing party at its conference, because it said that, yes, we should opt for expropriation of land without compensation, taking into account the issue of the impact of the economy, productivity of land, and food security. Those are issues that need to be taken into account, and as we move forward with this, we obviously need to use those as filters, to use those as issues that we need to pay attention to as we return the land to our people. And that we are going to do, and we will not turn away from returning the land to our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Tring.
Mr. President, the restoration of land to those from whom it was stolen has legitimacy. It is the view of the ACDP that there is sufficient land and resources for all South Africans to enjoy and benefit from. The secret, however, is in the implementation of the policies, and corruption certainly cannot be a part of the equation. The ACDP MMC for Human Settlements in the city of Johannesburg has been instrumental in restoring dignity to our residents by issuing thousands of title deeds to first-time homeowners, Does the President agree that in order to restore dignity of all South Africans, that property rights must be protected by law and title deeds given to the poor and marginalized, which can then be leveraged to grow their wealth? Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Yes, I agree that giving land to our people, ensuring that we protect their rights and we give them tenure and give them title deeds is precisely what we should do. There's been asset poverty in our country for generations and hundreds of years. When land was taken from our forebears, what was done through that act, and including the legislative part, the Land Act of 1913 and so forth, which was preceded by wars of dispossession when our people were moved from areas where they lived, was actually asset stripping. They were stripped of the assets that they had, and many of our people had two types or three types of assets. They had their land, they had their livestock, and they also had their own inherent knowledge and experience. And when they were moved, they were stripped of all those, and they remain assetless for hundreds of years. And to that end, many of our people, our forebears, were never even able to leave and bequeath anything to their children as inheritances, because what they could have left as bequest to their children was taken away. And that is when poverty set in. That is when inequality set in real effect. So this is what we're seeking to change. We're seeking to change the architecture of asset-based wealth in our country. So giving our people land, giving them title deeds, is actually to give them the assets that they should have had throughout their lives. And so we support title deeds granting to our people. We support that they should have tenure, and the Constitution is very clear on this. It talks about tenure and land rights for all and not for some. We live in a country where land rights and tenure were for some only, for a minority of minorities. And this must now end. We must give land to our people. That is something we are not going to turn away from. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move to question 11, asked by the Honorable S.N. August. Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Since the start of the 6th Democratic Administration in May of 2019, I have attended 6 international summits covering both political and economic issues. And these are the G20 in Japan, the African Union Extraordinary Summit in Niger, as it's pronounced, Niger, the SADC Summit in Tanzania, the Tokyo International Conference on Africa's Development in Japan, Russia-Africa Summit in Sochi in Russia. Now, these gatherings provided an opportunity for South Africa to advance its own foreign policy and promote its economic interests. At the G20 summit in June, for example, leaders reaffirmed their support for the necessary reform of the World Trade Organization to improve its functioning. They agreed that action is necessary regarding the functioning of the dispute settling mechanism or system consistent with the rules as negotiated by WTO members. On the margins of the G20 summit, we participated in a Japan-South Africa business roundtable with business people from South Africa as well as from Japan. Among other things, this roundtable generated leads for possible investment projects in sectors such as mineral processing, automotives, battery production, but it also provided opportunities for our farmers who export fruit and vegetable to Japan to be able to interact with their counterparts and indeed with government officials there. And I've spoken about this before in this very house, how our fruit farmers, for instance, rather grape farmers, have been wanting to export grapes into Japan, the seedless grapes, and they are being prevented by their processes in Japan. And we were able to get them to interact and to raise the matter with the Prime Minister of Japan. Now, through this engagement, we were able to strengthen relations also with Japanese business community. This is important as Japan is South Africa's 5th largest trading partner and one of the largest sources of foreign direct investment into South Africa. We've got hundreds of Japanese companies invested here. And they use South Africa also as a gateway into the rest of the continent. Now, the African Union Summit in Niger in July of this year launched the operational phase of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and directed that the outstanding work on tariff schedules on issues such as rules of origin and commitments on trade in services be submitted to their next session in February 2020 for adoption. Now, the decisions of the summit are significant for the South African economy, since the African Continental Free Trade Area promises great opportunities for trade and other countries on the continent, broadening our manufacturing base as well as boosting employment in our own country. Now, the SADC summit, which happened in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, gave impetus to the implementation of the SADC industrialization strategy and roadmap, adopted the regional mining vision and action plan. Together, these programs aim to increase cooperation amongst countries in Southern Africa on building regional value chains to expand and enable the countries to expand their manufacturing base as well as diversify their exports. The Tokyo International Conference on Africa's Development, TICAD as it's called, which was held in Japan in August, resulted in a commitment from Japan to contribute to economic transformation in Africa and improve the business environment through innovation as well as private sector engagement. Now, the government of Japan undertook to bolster diversification and industrialization, support Japanese investment in Africa, and offer support for the development of regional agricultural capability. The first Russia-Africa summit, which was held in Sochi last week, focused on forging economic ties between Russia and African countries, developing joint projects and collaborating in the humanitarian and social sectors. In addition, the discussion between government leaders, there were also productive engagements between Russian and South African businesses, and we have a number of businesses that are invested in Russia, which you might know about. Now, all these processes have helped to increase cooperation in areas such as mining, information and communications technology, and extraction. While these international summits do not directly create jobs, they can create and contribute to an improved environment for investment, as well as contribute to increasing cooperation between countries. They do provide a platform that enables us as the South African government and business to promote investment opportunities in the country to explore new markets and to forge strategic partnerships. It was at this conference that we were able to invite a number of Russian businesses to come and attend our investment conference next week, and some of them will be coming. They also provide the opportunity to advance South Africa's position on a range of issues, like the reform of the multilateral institutions to international support for Africa's development. Now, the agreements that were reached and partnerships that were forged at these summits make an important contribution for economic growth, development, and job creation. And this is where, as we travel and get our companies to move with us in these visits, we inform them that they should participate meaningfully because they can move from contact with other companies to contract. And in fact, we have found that a number of them are able to sign up a number of contracts with their counterparts, and these are usually mutually beneficial. Thank you very much.
Honorable August.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, thank you for a good response, and one can see the good work that's being done at the summits. But after Minister Mboweni midterm budget policy speech yesterday, with his frank assessment of the SOEs and the trimming of the government's wage bill and our country's increasing debt, how will this assist in building confidence in our economy? Thank you.
Honorable President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and Honorable August, I see all these processes being very beneficial. And in fact, what all this really seeks to do is to get South Africa, through government and its business colleagues, to interact with various other colleagues in other countries to raise the key issue of garnering investments in our country. The more investments we get, the more we get companies that can come and invest in South Africa, whether they are offshore or locally based. And as they invest, they make profits. The profits go to the fiscus. We're then able to address the challenges that Minister Mboweni spoke about yesterday. Because the more we collect revenue, the more we are able to have enough funds to be able to support the various projects and programs that government should fund, in health, education, as well as supporting our provinces and our local municipalities. So I see this being something that is really positive and should be supported, because you know, when we go to the summits, it's not for fun, you know. You hardly ever have fun or any time to have fun. Actually, for the most part, you would rather say, I'd rather stay home and not go, because it's just meeting after meeting, pumping flesh after flesh to try and get people to come and invest here. You shake hands and you talk about your country continuously, and it's a wonderful calling. I would recommend it for anyone, but I tell you, it is hard work, it is good work that needs to be done for our beloved, beautiful South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Kietse.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, the sociological characterization of politicians currently is being questioned in terms of their dishonesty, and I would require you to be honest, extremely honest with the answer you're going to give us. Currently, there's more than 55% of youth unemployment in this country. And in 2018, you have launched what we call YES, the Youth Employment Service. We want to check how many thus far does the YES program produced? How many employment did it produce for young people? And in 2019, this year at SONA, you promised young people 2 million jobs. We want to check the progress. How far is that? How many employment opportunities have been created? Because we do not want to get in a situation where you promise people another millions of jobs without understanding what went wrong with the previous ones that we had promised. Thank you very much.
On a point of order, Chair.
Yes, honourable member.
I'm rising on Rule 142, which clearly states 142.6, which clearly states that a question must relate to the original question or the response of the president. It is not like that. And then number two, the very same question is of statistical nature. I don't think the president can have the numbers with him. Can you do that?
Okay.
Point of order.
What's the point of order?
The honorable member obviously has comprehension problems because the question has to do with summits, and the promises of jobs are related to these summits. So I don't know which parliament he's part of and which question paper is he reading, number one. Number two, if he has to stand and defend his own president for answering questions and giving details about his own promises, then we're in real trouble. The president must answer. If he doesn't know, he must say, I don't know, so we know he's not a useful president.
You see, Honorable Ndlozi, I don't know how you now put the president into this. You should have stayed out of what the president is going to say, yea or nay, and hear him do so. Honorable member, I'd like the president to respond to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Order, order, order. Hey, Honorable, Eman, where's Angle?
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I'm able to answer the question. The youth employment, well, let me start off by saying everybody agrees that youth unemployment is a major challenge. And it is to this end that we've set up an office in our office in the presidency to address the issue of youth unemployment. You refer to the Youth Employment Service. When the Youth Employment Service started, and I'll be honest with you, we thought that we would have galloped much further than where we are. We thought by the first year we would have had tens and tens of thousands of young people employed and given job opportunities. That has not, quite honestly, turned out as we thought, because there have been difficulties in getting the private sector to buy into this project. A lot more work is now being done, and it's now being mobilized much more effectively, and the take-up is increasing. And we should have known that it will take time. It will take time, because what it really means is that companies, including the public sector companies, are being encouraged to open up employment spaces in their own companies where they currently employ a number of people, and to create spaces for young people to be employed, to be brought into the world of work. And quite a number of them says we've already reached our limit, and it is through the encouragement that we put across to them and say, please take more and more young people. The last time I got a report, the report was telling me that it's almost getting to 50,000 young people who have now been brought into the program. And they are looking at more and more young people coming in. It was hovering between 40-something, 45,000 and 50. And it's gathering momentum as we're moving on. Now, the one that we are working on in our office is going to go beyond that, because we've agglomerated a number of other partners, other entities that are involved in a similar type of process. Now, we will be able to give numbers without any doubt, but the good thing about this program, the YES program particularly, is that it brings in young people for a year into the world of work. But we have found that almost between 70 and 80% of those young people do finally get permanent jobs in the various companies that employ them. The companies that take them, Because what they then do, they find that a number of these young people are real gems. They are real outstanding gems, and they absorb them. So a number of them have been brought in, and others have also been encouraged and given pathways and platforms to start their own entities and businesses. So we are seeing a lot of benefit in this, and clearly the challenge is much bigger, and everybody would want to hear that millions of young people have been brought in. But it is quite difficult to create jobs. It is quite difficult for entities to create jobs, and we need our economy to grow by leaps and bounds for jobs to be created. And to create one job actually is quite expensive. And so we are nudging forward, we are encouraging, and we are also doing it through the tax incentive, the youth employment tax incentive process. And we're finding that companies are responding to that as well. So I hope that answers you, and that is the honesty that I'm able to give you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Mbele.
Mr. President, when it comes to job creation, as should flow from economic summits, small business is key. And the first step is then to recognize how real jobs are created. And that is to abandon the fantasy that governments can create jobs, and to look at supporting the private sector, because it's small and large business who create jobs, and government's role is to provide an enabling environment for investments and for entrepreneurship. And that can be stifled when we have excessive regulation and red tape. So if we want that booming small business sector and to create jobs, we've got to cut that red tape, as the DA is doing in the Western Cape through our red tape reduction programs. In the past Parliament, we proposed a red tape reduction bill with those proposals to make it easy for business to run. So, Mongameli, when can we start seeing the governments move on red tape reduction, and can we count on your supports on such a bill within the coming year in this House to slash that red tape and enable job creation?
Honorable President.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes.
Deputy Speaker, the new leader of the DA asked this question as a follow-up earlier on, that will the President support the Finance Minister to remove the red tape? And there are honorable members with new questions. Can we maximize the time of these questions? Because it has already been answered, this question, in this session.
Yeah, okay.
It looks like the new DA doesn't have creativity now.
Okay. Now, President, please answer the question.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The answer to that is yes. We want and continue to want to remove red tape. And this was raised very prominently with us by the business sector. And we then asked them to specify the areas where red tape still existed. And they have. Now, at these meetings that I was talking to you about, the first Monday of every month at NEDLEC, that's precisely what we are also doing. We are looking more specifically at areas where there is red tape. I cited the water licensing one. I cited a number of others, and we were able to bring in those people who run the water license permitting process. And they explained the process, and we said, no, we want you to reduce the timeline that it takes to get a water license. And this happened when I told them that I waited for 3 years to get a water permit for water that rose on my farm. And I said, why did I have to wait for 3 years? And they couldn't give me an answer. And so therefore we want to reduce that. So it's a number of other processes. Now on supporting your bill, and I would say you should really actively engage with the Minister of Trade and Industry, because Minister Patel is the one who is seized with all these matters that have to do with red tape. I will ask him to invite you for coffee or whatever else you drink. He will be able to invite you for that, so that you have a discussion to see the proposals that you want to put forward, how well they are really well synchronized with what they are doing. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Zungula, ATM.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, I note your initiatives to grow the economy and create jobs, particularly the summits, investment conferences that you've gone to. But none of these initiatives have created jobs as unemployment keeps on rising. Also, there is the looming fourth industrial revolution whereby job losses, particularly for the entry-level jobs, where they might be lost. Earlier you spoke about the issue with our economy is in the way in which it is structured. So the question is, what fundamental transformation to the economy are you going to embark on in order to improve the material conditions of the people? In other words, can you please define what you mean by the restructuring of the economy? Thank you.
President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, let me start off by saying that it simply is not true. Repeat, it simply is not true that some of the outcomes of the summits that we hold do not result in jobs being created. It isn't true. And I think we need to deal with that. And maybe it is possible that people hardly ever notice what is done in this country and how it is done. Maybe the news that goes around they never see. Everybody agrees that unemployment is high and we've got to reduce it. When I started my input, I said, one of the things that's happening here is that as we create jobs, we're finding that the net effect of it is being diluted by the more and more young people who get into the job market. It does not mean that jobs are not being created. Jobs are being created, and I give you maybe one or two examples. Last year, we held the investment summit. 300 billion rand was committed for investment. And I give you one simple example. There was an investment commitment by a young man who comes from Uganda who makes cell phones like your smartphone, a real beautiful slimline smartphone. And he said, when I met him at the investment conference, I said, I want you to come and invest in South Africa. And he said, Mr. President, we will come and build a factory in South Africa. And indeed, they've come, they've built a factory, they've invested hundreds of millions of rands. And a week or so ago, I went to open the factory. They've employed 200 young people. 70% of them or so are women. 94% of them are newly trained young people. And that is the job value that you get out of the summit. And a number of other companies, Toyota have expanded their own processing. And they've employed more people. Mercedes-Benz made a commitment, they've employed more people. So it is a fallacy to say that all these efforts are not yielding anything. It is not true. And I don't think we should propagate untruths here in this parliament. Now, what are we doing? What are we doing about restructuring the economy? And it is possible that even the laws that are passed here, Honorable Deputy Speaker, are probably not noticed. Their full impact is not noticed by even the members of this very parliament. And if a member of parliament will say, what is it that you're doing in restructuring the economy, and they are not aware themselves of the laws that they pass, then I don't know what we are talking about. Because that member should have known that when they amended the Competition Act, that Competition Act was meant to help in restructuring the economy. When that member passed a number of other transformative acts that impact of the economy, on the economy of our country, they should have known that that's precisely what we are doing. So we are in the process of restructuring this economy. We inherited an apartheid and a colonial economy, and we are restructuring it repositioning it to be a transformed economy. Now, the economy we inherited was deformed. It locked out majority of black people out of the economy. Now, you cannot tell me that since 1994 we have not been making efforts to transform this economy. Because if that is the case, then I think somebody has been sleeping through this whole process. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. We now move to the next question asked by Honorable Gungubele to the President. Mr. President, question 12.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, 3 months ago, South Africa submitted its first voluntary review on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals to the United Nations. Now, the aspirations of the SDGs complement those of the National Development Plan, especially the overarching objective of eradicating poverty and inequality. The report highlights progress in a number of fields covering things like literacy and child mortality to access to basic services and climate change mitigation and adaptation. The report also notes that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies, not only in the world, but on earth. As the unemployment statistics released this week show, we will continue to bear the brunt of the historical distortions of our labor market and our economy for a very long time to come. Our task is to implement measures that stimulate and grow the economy of our country and create jobs, but at the same time to address and overcome the root causes of inequality. Now, attracting domestic and international private capital into our economy leads to more job opportunities that can be created. Over the past 18 months, we've been on a concerted drive to implement policy and regulatory reforms that will make it easier, but much more importantly, cheaper to do business in South Africa and to undertake other measures to stimulate growth. Next week, as I said earlier, we will hold the second investment conference as part of our drive to attract 1.2 trillion rand over 5 years. Last year, we were able to raise in commitments to investments, and some of those are coming through. We were able to raise 300 billion rand of investments into our economy. We will be showcasing investment opportunities at this conference in a diverse range of sectors, including in infrastructure. As I say all the time, that infrastructure is the flywheel of economic growth. We will also be showcasing opportunities in our mining sector, because we see mining as a sunrise sector in South Africa. The ocean's economy beckons. The economy in our seas, it's calling us to come and invest. But we will also be showing the opportunities in renewable energy. The whole world is now booming with renewable energy projects, and finance institutions and banks are all rushing to finance some of these projects. Now we've got the sun, we've got the wind, and we've got many other elements that are freely given to us by Providence that we must utilize, and this gives rise to the opportunities that we should utilize to generate growth in our economy. Now, the commitments made at last year's conference have already translated into projects that have created jobs. I was citing one earlier. Through the Job Summit Framework Agreement, we have committed resources to support rural and township economies, to stimulate entrepreneurship and encourage innovation, Funding has been set aside for the establishment of a township and rural entrepreneurship fund that will enable small business to get easier access to markets, financing, business support, and other services. Now, this is part of Minister Nchabeni's plans to make sure that the small business sector becomes revitalized. We are revitalizing industrial parks around the country and expanding the special economic zones. Among the industrial parks that have been prioritized include Botshabelo, Putadichaba, Garankuwa, Isitebe, Komani, Seshego. Those are some of the projects that we are focusing on. Dimbaza is one other area, and we are now injecting more revitalization in those. Land and agrarian reform are key to the meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Access to land enables our people to farm for themselves and to do so commercially, and to have a place to live and to have an asset, as I was saying earlier, that can be used as collateral for business and other loans. We are implementing a range of measures to support commercial, small scale, as well as subsistence farmers. This is essential to fighting poverty in rural households. If we are to eradicate poverty and reduce inequality, we must also address youth unemployment, as I was saying. We have set up a project management office, as I was saying, in the presidency, to develop an integrated comprehensive employment strategy. This office will coordinate various other initiatives that I've already spoken about to address youth unemployment, both within and beyond government, and make all these initiatives work together in an integrated manner. Now, the Expanded Works Program has been a major source of economic opportunities for many of our people, and especially young people and women, in the process of imparting the job skills that are so needed and the training. We also have to reform our education system to make it much more responsive to the requirements of the economy. This includes the work to introduce technical subjects in more of our schools and the conversion of traditional high schools into technical high schools. Now, this I saw for myself just last week in the Free State, where we were exposed to young people who are being offered technical subjects at schools. Now, at grade 9, 11, and 12, they are now beginning to become boiler makers. They're learning boiler making, which is now going to enhance their own capability. Now, this for me was the greatest joy, to interact with young people and to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And to hear them say, or not say, to hear them not say, I want to do HR, I want to do just a BA. They are now saying, I want to become a boiler maker, I want to become a welder, I want to become aerospace, whatever, I want to become an engineer, I want to become a pilot. This is now unleashing the mental energy of our young people who are now looking at great opportunities that are now being ignited by the technical education that they are getting at grade 9, 10, and 11. So this we must be grateful for, because this represents a silent revolution that is spreading amongst the various educational facilities or schools that we have at that low age. So they no longer have to wait to pass matric to go into a college and university to go and learn about boilermaking. They are now learning it as they go on, and it will be crowned by the artisan training that they will get once they go to artisan school. Now, to overcome the unemployment crisis, to end poverty and reduce inequality requires a concerted effort by all of us, all social partners, including government, labor, business, civil society, and also this parliament. So we all have our job cut out for us. And I hope that we will take this up very seriously and commit to what we need to do in the way of our debates, the suggestions that we make, the laws that we pass, the interventions that we make on an ongoing basis. All hands must be on deck to address the job challenge that our country faces. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Gungubele.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, one must appreciate the fact that you have gone a long way to articulate and account to this country on your activities taking this country forward. But however, you've articulated what appears to be good work in progress, taking into account that the SDGs are globally dictated kind of imperatives from the point of human development. And also there are dependencies that are outside this country within the environment where South Africa is trading. It would be useful to hear the President sharing with the country with regard to what would be the significant role of SADC and probably the point where 2063 vision of the continent, that will actually send a message that we're aware of the dependencies and the sustainability of these goals once they take off from within the country.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I think one most wonderful thing about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they are a mirror against which every country needs to look at itself. But to go even beyond just seeing that as a mirror, they are a call to action to address the needs of the people of our country. And these are universal needs. The goals that are set out in the SDGs are so overarching and transversal, and they affect the lives of people all over the world. And now we have appropriated them in SADC, and the Agenda 2063 of the African Union has also appropriated those. And when you look at Agenda 2063, it is a real sort of mirror image of what the SDGs are about. Now, we must see them as a real call to action. And for us, they're a guide, but more than that, they are also an evaluation mechanism to evaluate ourselves in terms of what we are doing to address the needs of of ordinary people. Now, this is what we have to do, and it is good that they have been put out. It is almost like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which even liberation movements looked at and fed from to inform how the struggle should be prosecuted. For us, the Freedom Charter was that mirror and that call to arms and to action that we also utilize. So along the way, we've been very fortunate to have all these instruments. Now, in our case, it's also the NDP, the National Development Plan, that is a call to action in terms of what we need to do. But the SDGs, which we voluntarily decided as a country that we are going to report on, and reporting on them also showed up where we may be weak, where we may have shortcomings, but we had the strength of courage to say we must report, because it is the country reporting to the world, but more importantly, reporting to its own citizens about the progress or lack thereof that we are making. And in a number of areas, we are making tremendous progress. But it is when we see ourselves against the backdrop of what other countries are doing that we are then able to quicken our step as we see how other countries are implementing the SDGs so that we are not left behind, because those SDGs are meant to leave no one behind, and this is what we have committed ourselves to ensure that our people as a whole do indeed have an improved life as we implement these SDGs. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm very glad you mentioned land and agrarian reform as one of the measures to meet these challenges, because we believe that South Africans must own land in their own right, and that includes agricultural land. But while you are busy with the populist red herring of a constitutional amendment, there's plenty that your government could be doing immediately without recklessly attacking property rights. And you could start by reversing the land reform program you introduced in 2011 called PLUS. Under the previous program called LRAD, lease agreements with the state had an automatic built-in offer to purchase after 5 years. But since 2011, this has been removed. And that's why a black emerging farmer like David Rakhatse had to take you to court with the help of the DA to compel you to sell his own land to him. So, Mr. President, here's a suggestion for you today. If you're serious about land reform and about freeing black farmers from the permanent serfdom that they're under, isn't it time that you put a tiger in your tank and committed to reversing this unjust policy and give them a chance to own and buy the state-owned land?
Mr. President.
Honorable Steenhuisen, I'll be very, very clear and direct with you and fair and say, yes, a variety of interventions we should make on land reform should include precisely the point you are making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Boshoff.
Honorable Deputy Speaker en president, eerbare president, agbare president, ek glo dis agbaar en eerbaar. Sustainability is an integration of the three concepts of social, economic and environmental issues. And in your exposition, you gave a lot of attention to economic and social issues, but not to the environment, which I do not find surprising if I look around me, because we nearly literally drown in waste in South Africa, while waste is actually a concept which should be abolished, because every waste stream is actually a resource stream. I specifically want to refer to Karoo towns in the Northern Cape, where they predominantly make use in new sewerage plants of evaporation dams, rather than finding some way, of which many are extremely labor intensive, to reuse that water and to use the resources locked up in the sewerage stream. I would like to know from the President if it's part of the plan of sustainability to recover our environment in a labor-intensive way. Thank you, Mr.
President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The answer is yes. If you were to spend time with Minister Creasy, she will tell you that part of the plans they have in the department that she runs, the ministry she runs, environmental affairs, is precisely that. To make sure that, one, we look after our environment, and this we are bound to do. We have no choice, because with the challenges of climate change, we are duty-bound, we are historically bound and futuristically bound to look after our environment in more ways than one. We have been found to be one of the biggest polluters, particularly on our continent, and we've got to address climate change challenges, carbon emissions much more seriously, and we've got a very clear program and plan for that. But on issues like addressing wastage, the department, the ministry has a huge program to do precisely that. So the answer definitely is yes. We want to do it, and we see it. We see the economic derivative out of the environment, because waste treatment, for instance, is a subset of an industrial sector on its own, which needs to be mined properly, which needs to be properly exploited, and it can be a great job creator. And in fact, it is a great job creator. So from that point of view, we are looking very closely at it, and we're coming up with programs and interventions that are going to address that, because the whole process of job creation is just really overriding. It cuts across everything that we do, and we're also focusing on this. And the other important benefit is that we've got a number of women who participate in that subset of the economy. So the answer is yes, we see environment as a huge job creation process that we need to embark upon. So have time to have tea with Minister Creasy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable President. Honorable Ngwezi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, the goals as listed require a long-term strategic commitment from government to grow the economy and provide sustainable jobs for people. Your Minister of Finance was quoted yesterday saying that the country spends more than we can earn, which alludes to the point about the country being unable to directly finance the realization of these goals, but rather requires a flourishing economy to realize such goals. Now, putting aside short-term employment, I would like to know from you what programs the presidency has or will be putting in place to permanently locate industry in order to address each of the listed sustainable goals, whether you think that South Africa will meet the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, our aim is to meet the 2030 agenda. From our own purposes with the NDP, on a number of areas we are behind, we accept that. Job creation, we are behind. And on an overall basis, we do want to meet those goals. And we've got to keep trying, and we are going to make every effort to meet those goals. And of course, we are making a lot of efforts, much as the Minister of Finance did say, that we are spending much more than we can afford, or much more income than we have. We want to redress that. We want to turn that around as well. And he laid out clear interventions that we need to embark upon. Interventions that can lead us there without, at the moment, getting us into heavy austerity measures. We think we are gently wishing to turn this ship around from the precipice. And I believe that the interventions that he put in place and the interventions that we are going to continue taking are such that they will ensure that we don't go into that precipice. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, President. Honorable members, that concludes questions to the President. Before you rise, please hold on. There are two, President, please, okay. There are two members of staff who I thought I can't not inform you that they've requested early retirement. Now, they joined Parliament at a very significant period of our country. One of them is Sandy Williams. He worked here for 27 years. And the other is Shamir Davids, who worked here for 26 years. And they were both working in the members' facilities. And this is why I thought I should ask you to give them a round of applause and wish them well. Unfortunately, I didn't ask them to come over here. They had a party with staff where they were, and this is what they had fund for. We'll communicate on your behalf, members. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned.